Thank you all for coming in today. This is the PIR education workshop specifically on creating engaging virtual poster presentations. Just to get out of the way first, we are recording the presentation today. I'll just be recording my own view and the presentation itself. So if you would prefer not to be on the video, just use the chat rather than unmuting yourself. That's the only way that you'll actually come through on that. And we're just keeping that so we have a record for anyone who couldn't come today. So if anyone has any issues with that, just let us know in chat. But otherwise, let's dive in, shall we? So thanks for coming out today. So my name is Melissa Taylor Gates. I work in the Minds Lab, and I'm the Innovation and Evaluation Manager there. I've been at it for about 2 years now, and some of you, quite a few of you, know me because you have sent me videos that you have prepared for various conferences and presentations that we've had for different PIR events. So I'm hoping to give you some information today that will be helpful, that will help you feel more confident is the main thing. With the work that you're doing and with the presentations you're pouring out, so that when you are presenting, you can focus on your content and not worry so much about all this other stuff and get bogged down in the tech side. I've got my contact information there. You can also find me in the email Outlook listing. So if you need any questions, there you go. So to give you a sense of what we're going to talk about today, I've organized the workshop in sort of 3 different parts. So we've got about 20 minutes of each one of these. So the first one is about improving your slide decks, specifically talking about how do we take a poster presentation, which traditionally is on a big board that people can walk up to. How can we take that format and use that to make a presentation that's more engaging online? Second phase is going to be stepping up your setup. So specifically things around video, audio, all those technical things that you can plan. And then the last one is about the actual process of recording and submitting videos, which I know a lot of people struggled with. How do I get the correct file type? How do I send a video if it's too high quality and I need to send it some external source? So we're going to talk about all that stuff. So in between each of these phases, we'll have time for questions. So if you have any questions related to those, I'll be happy to answer them as I can. So let's dive in first to improving your slides. We have a long and storied history of PowerPoint presentations, and I think a lot of us got used to some of the, let's say, minimum viable product. So this is all things that you can do to try to make your presentations a little bit more engaging. So I've got a poster up here, and this is from one of the Minds Lab students. This is Alec and Renee and Arlene who have put this one together. And as you can see, it is very difficult to be able to read and engage with when you are on a screen the size that we are using. Apart from the titles, I personally can't read any of this. And so that's why we're going to figure out what's a better way to do that. So the thing is, in a lot of cases, you've already written a lot of this great content, right? You have a title, you have your team members, you have your overview, methodologies, results, because those are the things you need when you're doing your abstract work, when you're publishing. So what we want to highlight is basically that you can take this information you already have and it's organized in a way that makes a lot of sense. So basically that you can take a poster like this and instead break it down by sections. So I've got kind of 2 options we'll be talking about for this part. One of them is the kind of the fast and dirty model, which is just zooming in basically on your poster and using your mouse to show people around. And the other is, of course, to make a proper presentation with slides and base that on the content. So here's an example of 2 different versions. So on the left, we have literally just a part of that first slide. So I'm going to go back actually. So I'm pulling out just the very top left corner here into a format that we can read. So just because it's larger, we have a better chance of reading it. Of course, it is very wordy. And if you look towards the one on the right, you'll see that we've broken it down into kind of these key takeaways. So the audience is a little bit different. We're not putting the details of the citations throughout. You certainly can. But in this case, we've left all those references to the end. So it's very much a sense of let's talk about what we've created. And you can always make the full-size poster downloadable as well. So that's another bonus you can have. But let's dive into the first one of those. So if you're going to be zooming in on your presentation, what's a way to do that? So this is a really, really low prep option. It's something that I do when I am sort of last minute realizing that I need to get something done that I need to be able to present, because it doesn't require you to make any extra information. So basically what you do is you pull open a copy of your poster on your computer, you put it full screen, or rather you share screen, then you put it full screen, and you actually zoom in using your mouse. So the little roller ball on your mouse there usually helps you zoom in and out on a photo, and you can use any kind of photo program to view it. And then all you're doing is grabbing and moving around the vision. So what you can do is sort of make them almost look like slides. So you take what is that first image where you have all that content that's not viewable, and you zoom in until you get to the point where people can actually engage with the content. So some pros and cons of this one, obviously the pro is it's not as much time to do it. You probably already have something like this created, maybe not so much during COVID since we haven't had a reason to, but that's a benefit of this is that you have a traditional poster, it has a traditional format, and it's pretty quick to do. The negatives is that it's still presented in such a way that it's better for a poster presentation. So traditional poster presentations, people are going to walk around, read as they will, ask questions. And obviously, when we talk online, when we present online, that's not always the flow of things. So the way that we present is ideally a little bit different. So this is a good, quick solution, but not necessarily the best one. What I think we're all kind of familiar with is making our own presentation. So a lot of the posters that have been submitted recently for different events have been ones that are a more traditional PowerPoint kind of presentation. So something I recommend as a first step before you start working on your content at all, or rather, as soon as you have all those points down, is using a presentation template. So as you can see from what I'm presenting here, I've picked a template and I'm using it. This is a website that I use, and you all have a copy of this as well with links, but Slides Carnival is one of my favorite websites for this. So you can click on that, go, and you can browse through a whole bunch of different presentations and different styles. And the really nice thing about this one is it has lots of different ways to share the data. So I've got some examples here of a couple of slides that are nicely organized and share information. And you can see that because all the colors, the formatting, where everything is sitting is already pre-decided, it makes it a lot easier for you to put together a presentation that's going to be enjoyable. You don't need to worry about moving things around. You can just basically look through the list of slide outlines. This one usually has around 30 different slides designed for it. And then you just pick the ones you want and use those as a basis. So it's really nice because I think a lot of us have a traditional kind of basis of wanting to include all the information. We want to share all the data we have. And sometimes that means we just have a long bullet list. What's really nice about these is that they have ways that you can visually share your data in different ways, and you can give it in these little kind of bite-sized nuggets that people can really dig into and really understand. So if you're using a table to compare data, for example, it's a really nice way to pull some of those highlights out so people can really understand what it is that you're trying to get them to understand. So you're doing a little bit more of the work for them, because I think, as we all know through COVID, it's been very difficult to keep people engaged. People's energy falls off, people get distracted. So we're doing a little bit more of that connecting the dots for them. And then in general, this is just good advice, is use more slides, but put less content on each slide. There's lots of different rules. So 5-5-5 is a really common one. 5 bullets, no more than 5 words, and no more than 5 slides of that in a row. There's different rules. In the end, it's really about what you want to present on. But there really is a value to using more images, to sharing less content so that people can really dig into the content you're going to share. Next thing to talk about a little bit is text guidelines. So I've got 2 different presentations here below. Both of them are slides from a presentation on how to make a good first impression. And you can see on the left, we have a very simple one, which is just basically the content you might get on a printout. And you can tell that they've had some issues with their word processor because they've literally just pasted this in and you've got those squiggle lines underneath the title. So it's showing you that it thinks that's a misspelling. So in this case, it's not necessarily a great presentation. You've got the image hanging a little bit off the side, and it's very, very hard to read through this, especially if you're doing a presentation. If someone's speaking to you, reading that kind of content is going to be a lot of work. If you compare that to the one on the right, you see that we've got kind of one big takeaway, and they've broken this into kind of 4 different slides, and they're really just highlighting one of those points for each. So rather than having 4 or 5 slides worth of information, as we do on, instead of having 5 points in one slide, you're spreading them out over 5 different slides. And what that allows people to do is better follow the chain of understanding. So they understand step 1 is be prepared, and that's easier to remember and to hold on to. So general guidelines, if you're going to use a template, which again, I always recommend, there's also ones you can download directly from Microsoft. Don't fiddle with the template. Really, everything's been organized in a certain way. So if you have a title, you don't need to worry about moving it around. If you keep things consistent, it'll look nice and clean, and that's the main thing. We don't want to make that your presentation is pulling focus from the content. So as much as possible, if you keep it simple and consistent, that's great. Lastly here, I have a note say use visuals. So visuals are by far the best. People respond best to images, and that can be a mix. That could be, meme jokes like I had earlier. It can be pictures of real people. It could be references. And those tend to be the best, especially when you have maps or visual charts that kind of show how things move. Those tend to be very well responded in the literature. Otherwise, bullet points are generally seen as better than paragraphs, but again, bullet points are starting to have a little bit more of a decline. If you're familiar with a few different presentation formats, there are actually some, for example, where you have a slideshow that's all images, and every 20 seconds it flips to the next image. So there's all kinds of different formats that people use to try to engage more visually. You certainly don't need to go to that extreme. It doesn't really fit with our audience anyways. But in general, if you have a visual or you can create a visual that really clearly shows what you want to talk about, it's generally very well represented in PowerPoints. Next up, we've got our image guidelines. So one really important thing that happens a lot is people stretch their images. So preserving your image dimensions is really important. As you can see here in this picture, I've gone to an extreme to kind of show you what it would look like. But the image starts looking decayed, it's low quality, just doesn't look really great. So I took this screenshot, which I put in here, and you can see that red line across the way. And what that's signaling to me is that all of these pictures are even with each other. So the amount of space, if you look at that third image, the amount of space at the top and the bottom is the same. And then if you notice along the very, very bottom of the images, there's these little H's, little wide H's, and those show you that the space between each of those images is the same. So a lot of the programs we use have these built in, these really simple features that help you organize things. If anyone's used Canva, which is a really great program for doing kind of quick images like social media, they also rely heavily on these guidelines. So it's something that you can really rely on as you use different programs. And as I said before, ideally you're using a mix of different kinds of images. You're using real images of people that you might recognize, using memes, using GIFs, using stock images, whatever feels right for the presentation. Certainly longer presentations can really benefit from using some humor to try to get people to feel more comfortable. And it really depends on the content that you're delivering, of course. Next is we have some pacing guidelines. A lot of these are going to be pretty obvious for you who've presented in the past. Always practice ahead of time. That's always a really important key step. It really helps as well for you to feel comfortable with the content and what's going to be coming up. You should always be set up before you start your intro for a presentation. So for example, when we started this, people came into the room. I started recording. I shared screen, and then I immediately pulled this up full screen. So the idea is to make sure that everything is as smooth as possible. You certainly don't need to share your presentation before you want, if you do want to talk with just your image at kind of full size. But there are ways to simplify that process. You aren't humming and hawing for a while. And honestly, a lot of that comes from practice, from just trying it a couple times. So, you know, Zoom is great for this. We have a whole bunch of, I think everyone can access 40 minutes free from Zoom right now, and you can just go in and just try it, share screen, full size, the PowerPoint slip through. So there's lots of really good ways to practice. If you can, it's always good to plan for breaks and engagement. I like to tell people up front, so like this presentation today, letting you know that we're going to break things into kind of 20, 25-minute chunks, and letting you know what content's going to be covered in which piece. So if, you know, you're working off your side of your desk, if you're distracted, if you're making lunch, you can really sit down and focus on the content that's relevant to you, and not feel like you're necessarily losing out. Last thing I would say is that it's really helpful to use references, and you know, we have references for our presentations all the time. We obviously want to talk about the research that we're building upon, but the other thing you can do with reference slides is you can actually make slides that you're not going to use in your presentation, but ones that you'll pull up if you need to. So in the past, I've seen people do appendices, for example. They might have one of their appendices shown in a reference page. So if anyone questions that, or they want to know the timeline or the budget or any of these details, you can have slides at the end that you won't go into unless someone asks that question. So you have this nice little pocket of support for your work, but you don't actually have to go into everything at the beginning of the presentation. So that's another benefit, another thing that I think is really, really helpful. Next one, we're going to talk a little bit about engagement. A lot of this is focused on doing a presentation that is pre-recorded, but in some cases, you'll have the opportunity to be live. So just a couple of things there. It's always great to start with a question before you begin your proper presentation. Some people ask, you know, what's your role? Where are you from? What do you hope to get out of the session? Get people talking in the chat is always a really, really good way to start building that energy and that connection. I recommend using surveys and polls whenever possible. A really easy one is this one, Mentimeter, which you can take a look at, but you can do all kinds of things. The one I really love to use is the ranking one. So you can give people, let's say, 5 options and say, I want you to sort these from 1, the most important, to 5, the least important. And what Mentimeter does is let you do that on your phone. So all the participants fill it out on their phone with a code. And then you can immediately see the results, and it will sort the results for you. And of course, you can share that with the audience as well. So if you want to work on something, or if you want to get real-time feedback, there's some really, really good ways to do that. In general, when you're getting low engagement, you want people to talk more. Some simple things to do: ask yes or no questions, ask people to rank things from 1 to 5, or say how important this issue is to them. Anything you can do to simplify will start getting people engaged. And once they are engaged, then they'll start asking more questions and being more engaged overall. And each of these sections, this is the end of the first section, each of these sections has a helpful resource page. And again, this is more helpful for you guys to take home. There's a lot of things in this presentation you might want to refer to later. So on the left here, we've got making more effective slides. This is a really great little web page. And it actually shows you kind of a bad example and a good example. And it's really, really clear. So we'll say, here's, you know, 20 different problems. Here's how it looks in the best place. Here's how it looks in the worst. So it's really, really nice to be able to just pull those out and get some clean examples. And I know people have asked for those. So I've got some more throughout, but another great list. The other is 19 video presentation tips, and this is just a classic list off the internet. It's a little dry. It does not have any visuals or anything in it, but it's really, really nice and clean and straightforward. So there is certainly a benefit to that. This is just a little pull from that. So that's the first chunk of the presentation. So if anybody has any questions about making slides, I'm happy to answer them now. Feel free to unmute yourself or drop your questions in chat, and Cheryl is here to help facilitate that as well. But let's dive into stepping up your setup. So this is the more technical side of things as far as webcams, audio, things like that. So first thing we're going to talk about is your computer. So probably the biggest issue that we have in presentations like this is when your computer is slow. That can be really, really difficult when you're doing a presentation, especially if your audio isn't coming through cleanly, if you're trying to share a video and the video isn't playing. So these are just general things to help you make sure that your computer is in the best shape it can. So the first one I have here is to run a speed test. There's a link to a speed test, but basically what you can do is you'll get something like in the bottom right there image, which will tell you exactly what your download, your upload speed is. If you're not super tech, that might seem really complicated. Basically, what you want to compare it to is your internet provider's plan. So they say, you know, we'll give you up to 25 megabytes per second of upload. So that's that last number there. So knowing that we're at 23, that would be pretty good. But if let's say your upload was 200 and you're only using 23, there might be some things you can do to improve it. So it's just a good kind of check-in to see how you're doing. But again, you really need to know what your current plan is. And of course, a better plan is always going to have higher speeds. In general, when you're going to be presenting, always close programs you're not using. That includes like different tabs in your browser. Anything you can do to take a little bit of the drain off of your computer is great. Next one, hardwire in whenever possible. So I've got a picture of an Ethernet cord there. So Ethernet cords there's usually a port on the side of your computer that will let you hardwire into the internet. Basically, the thing is that if you were connected by a wire, it is going to be faster than if you're using Wi-Fi. So I do a lot of streaming personally. So I have a hard line to my laptop. I also have one to a gaming system. Anywhere that lag or a delay is going to be a problem, that's somewhere where you want to hardwire it whenever possible. And there's lots of ways to do that. Next thing, similar to checking about your computer itself and making sure that you're not using too many programs, is to reduce the number of things that are on your network. So if somebody is watching Netflix, that can cause a delay for you or cause lower video or audio quality. So looking at that speed test result below, you know, was saying we're getting 23 megabytes per second. But if that's split over a few different places in the house, then that can cause something. So usually before I do a presentation, I let everybody know. I say, hey, I'm going to be doing a presentation, you know, encourage quiet so you can really focus on what you're doing, but also just to remind people, you know, for the next hour or however long, it's helpful to be the only one who's usually using the internet really heavily. And the last thing, you've heard this from everyone, is to run an antivirus program regularly. One of the main reasons computers slow down is because there's tons of malware and spam on your computer. So anything you can do to make your computer healthier is going to result in better presentations. All right, now we got some real life images here of me trying to get some pictures so you understand the differences of some of these details. So first thing here is your backdrop. So you notice this is the same backdrop I'm using today. And I have one that's actually on my wall. So it's a physical thing that exists behind me. And personally, that works really, really well for me. But you can see if I turn my camera even slightly, you see, you know, my my laminator and some of my plants, and you know, it's a lot busier. So if I was presenting this presentation and you saw that stuff behind me, it would probably draw some of your focus. That goes doubly for children, family members, pets. Anything with movement is going to draw the eye as well. So thing to keep in mind, however much you can. First off, you want to pick a spot that has low traffic. So you don't want people obviously walking around in front of you however you can. It's always nice to have a little bit of visual interest, but not distracting. So you notice I've got this fireplace, draws a little bit of attention, gives a mood, but it's not pulling from what I'm doing, it's supporting it. And the last thing, and again, I have a wall poster because I prefer it, but it's to clean up your background. So there's lots of presentations I've done where people are sitting in the chair in the living room, for example, and you'll see some old coffee cups from McDonald's or Tim Hortons behind them. And it's just a lot easier to follow the content if you're not being pulled. Your attention isn't being pulled in these other directions. So anything you can do to just clean it up, to really pick a few things, like having a plant or having something, you know, it's like if you imagine putting a mantle up, right? You have all the things in your mantle. You don't want too much, because too much is going to complicate the eye. You're not going to be able to see anything. But if you focus on a couple really, really specific things that look great, it can really highlight and make everything more visually appealing. And of course, people are going to ask about this because this is virtual backgrounds. So again, I've put some images here. So this first image here will show you exactly what to click in Zoom to get a virtual image set up. So at the bottom here, you've got share video, and you've got a little up arrow. And if you click on that up arrow, you can choose a virtual background to use. So I picked one here at kind of random. And as you can see, it's not bad. Like it certainly is getting a fairly clear outline on my body. This isn't always the case, especially if your background is of the same color as your skin. You're going to get a little bit more delay or a little bit more. But if you look around the edges of my hair there, you see how it's losing some of that detail. And actually, if I go back, you'll see that I'm wearing a hair tie in this, right? Actually, the same one I'm wearing today. You notice that that is not visible in this image. So that's a thing to keep in mind, is sometimes when you're using virtual backgrounds, it will cut bits of you out. And that includes bits of your shirt, bits of your face. So it's something you really need to play with and say, is this going to work for me based on where I am, based on the image I have? So you can choose any image, which is really, really nice. If you Google virtual backgrounds or Zoom backgrounds, you can find all of these beautiful like shared spaces or apartments, and you can put them in the background. Another really nice thing is if you look in the second image there, I've got step 3, just to the right. One of the options there is blur. And blur is quite nice because what it does is blurs everything behind you. So it's a little bit of a lesser version. It, again, pulls focus a little bit, draws people to look at you, but it doesn't necessarily have the same dramatic, obviously, version as having an image. Images are also nice because you can customize them. You can put a little, you know, speech bubble or a logo on them. So there are other benefits to them. It's really a risk and reward kind of thing. So what's going to be best for you? So there's a really quick outline of how to do that. And of course, you can refer to this later if you want to set up a virtual background and play with that. Next thing we have is your lighting system. So the easiest solution I have to fixing your lighting is, rather than having a light behind you, move it in front of your computer or behind your computer. And what that does is gives you this sense of forward light, and it makes you look less washed out. So if you look at these two images of me, the difference is whether or not I have my window open. I have my window closed right now, and I have 2 light sources that I'm using to try to give myself a better setup. It's also helping because the background is more muted as a result, because the light's shining on me. So again, it gives a little bit of that foreground background divide. The last thing I mentioned is lighting color. You can notice a little bit in these images below is that you have a few different options. So I generally go for a warmer color, kind of a yellowy light. There's bluish lights, there's more natural lights. So you can find something that fits your style, fits what you're wearing, fits your complexion, but play with the lighting. That's a huge way to immediately improve the way that your video is shown. Even some details, if you look in the image on the right, you can see the little wave in the fabric of my background. So it's highlighting all these details that maybe we don't want, because now that's pulling the eye. Next up is our camera. So you got the setup of me you might be familiar with, and then you also have this version, which is aimed improperly and is also the built-in camera that comes with my computer. So I actually have an external webcam, but I also have a camera that's built into my computer. So if you look between the two of them, you can certainly see how granulated, how much lower quality the version on the right is. And of course, you're able to see all of those things that are kind of behind the works, right? You're able to see the drop ceiling behind me, or where the I can't even think of the word, where the vents are. But you can see all these other things, and also you're kind of looking up my nose. So it's not a particularly flattering light, and it's also really, really hard, especially if you're only getting this much of someone, as we all know. You lose a lot not seeing someone's mouth. So first thing you want to do is adjust your camera angle. You want to make sure that you're in the center of the frame, or a little bit to the side is even better. So you have, again, a little bit of visual interest, as if you're someone who's doing a photography shoot. Next thing is that it's always good to have your camera about eye level with you or higher. So an easy way to do that, a lot of people do, is just take a stack of books if you're going to be presenting and lift your computer up a little higher. If you have a standing desk, that's fantastic. It's really, really nice to be able to stand when you present. It gives a different energy, and people really pick up on that even when you're virtually presenting. Next one, I said don't center yourself. Again, as you can see with me, I'm a little bit off to the side, kind of 2/3. And again, that's just to add a little bit of visual interest, and also gives me the opportunity to move around the space a little bit so you get a sense of that space. In general, with a lot of these things, it's going to come down to two things I'm going to be repeating a lot. It's trying things out, playing with things, and testing them before you go. Taking time to play with your Zoom settings is well worth the time. You can modify, for example, which camera you're using. You can turn up your noise canceling. There's all kinds of little details that you can play with on your own. And again, there's no big cost to it. There's no big risk. The worst you can do is have to reset back to basic. But those are some obviously simple ways to get your camera set up a little better. Next, talk about a little bit about audio. The audio is probably the biggest issue we have when we're doing presentations like this. And I would say one of the biggest issues in general is ambient sound. So things like your window being open or someone talking in another room. So one thing I really love to do before I dive into a presentation is I'll do a really, really short recording, and I'll just test it out. So I'll just say, hey, this is me. I'm talking at my normal voice. This is me talking a bit louder. This is me talking under my breath. And then when I play that back as a video, I can listen and say, okay, well, I can't hear myself unless I'm projecting this out. I need the mic to be closer. I need to modify something. So testing the ambient sound is really, really important. Skipping down to point 3, managing your variables is really important. So, if I have my window open, there's a chance that an ambulance will come and you'll hear an ambulance sound. So rather than taking that risk, I'm going to eliminate the variable by trying to limit sound as much as possible. Based on that, I'm also going to say, broadly speaking, being indoors is better than being outdoors, unless it's a very, very quiet day for wind. Wind picks up through microphones really, really easily. So if you are going to try a video outdoors, really, really recommend you test that sound beforehand to make sure that you're not getting too much of that background, because there are definitely videos that I've edited before where the audio is so poor that you can barely hear the person speaking. All you're really hearing is the wind. Point 2 here, we say it's at minimum to use a headphone with a built-in mic. So I have a headphone that I'm wearing right now, but I actually have an external microphone that I use. And just to give you a sense of the difference in quality between the computer's built-in microphone and my external one, I'm just going to switch between them. So this is, and I'll show you the device later, but this is a quite nice microphone. And then this is switching over to what the default is for my computer. There's no difference for me. I can't hear any difference. But for you, you're probably aware that it's a little bit grainier, a little bit less high quality, maybe even is a bit harder to hear my enunciation between syllables. So it really does make a difference. So let me switch back to my normal mic. Okay. So something like that, and especially with how much audio is important in these virtual meetings, it's something to really prioritize. If you have a bad webcam and your image is in the corner while you present, that's not the end of the world. But if we can't understand what you're saying, we're losing a lot of the really valuable content. And lastly, again, play with your Zoom settings. So I have an image here, the image on the left, and that shows you the audio settings specifically in Zoom. So as you can see there, you can pick which speakers, which mic you're using. You can test them ahead of time. You can suppress the background noise. I have mine set to auto, so it just tries its best. But you can also set it, to be very high, for example, to try to block out dogs barking, for example. And a lot of websites and organizations are working really heavily on this to try to get rid of that background noise because it's so important. All right, I want to talk really briefly about phones. People aren't usually submitting videos that they've recorded on their phones, but it does happen, especially if you're making a presentation where you aren't referring to a PowerPoint. Phones are a great option. They usually record at higher quality than a lot of webcams would. It makes sense. You have $1,000 device in your pocket, why not use it? So the first step I would say is you have to use a stand of some kind. You have to find some kind of way for stability to be there. I have this little stand and it just sets my phone on it. I can use it during events. But the really nice thing about it is that I'm not going to be shaking. And again, if we're trying to remove variables that will distract from your work, anything you can do to stay more stable is going to help. Next thing is that if you can film sideways, that's always optimal, so horizontally. And the benefit of that is that it's the same dimensions that we're going to use for all other videos. So normally when we do a presentation, we're doing kind of widescreen, 16:9, or maybe 4:3. But when you have suddenly a video that's sideways, it really limits the ability to take advantage of the space. So what you want to do is sort of not have people automatically know, did I do this on a webcam or a phone? And using it horizontally is going to be the best way to take advantage of that space and level the playing field. Again, keeping your phone level, that is connected to the stability point. And if you look really closely at the image on the left, you can see that there are grid lines on the phone. So it's 2 lines horizontally and 2 lines vertically. This is something you can set up as a default on your phone. I have it on mine. And what's really nice is it just helps you sort of realize like, oh, I want this person to be standing straight in the image. So you use one of those lines to keep with their spine, for example. So it can be really, really helpful to take advantage of those things, and they don't show up in the final product. They're only for you when you're planning. But I find it very, very helpful. Last thing is you want to check your focus. A lot of phones do autofocus, do lots of weird things. So what you probably will want to do is if you click on yourself on your face when you start recording, that will help it zoom and find that's who I'm looking at, that's who I want to focus on. And obviously that will make the end product a little bit better. You can turn off all of these features, not use auto. Obviously the more professional people are going to manage every little detail, but in a lot of cases, the auto settings are good for a reason. All right, I wanted to include this just before we get to the resources for this section. This is just different gear that you can use to improve your recording. So if any of this speaks to you, you don't need it, but some people it helps to have a little bit of support. It makes you feel a little bit more confident. So these are all in order. So the first one here is we've got a ring light. So ring lights, you may have heard on social media. It's literally just a circle. So you can put your phone in the center, you can put the webcam in the center. My ring light is actually up to the side up here, which you can kind of see the shade. But they're very, very nice because you can adjust the lighting, turn it up or down like a dimmer switch, and you can change the color of your lighting as well. They're pretty cheap, and it really ups your game. And you can use them for a lot of different things, a lot of settings. They actually have ones you can get that actually sit on your phone. So again, thing to look into if you're interested. For audio devices, the very, very least what you want to have is earbuds, the kind I'm wearing, that have a microphone built into them so that it's picking up your voice through that. That's going to be the kind of the minimum. So if you think about the further your voice has to travel, the more diluted it can become with background noise. So if I'm talking and my mic is right here, that's a lot better than all the way to my computer and back. And my computer has a lot of sounds coming out of it anyways. It's got a fan working. It's revving a little bit. If you want something really nice, this Blue Yeti is what I use. It's quite expensive for a microphone, but it's very, very nice. HDMI webcams, again, this is the kind that I have. Lots of different versions there, but having it externally can be great. And then I also have the phone stands there that I showed, which allows you to have some phone stability. So that's a few things you can consider. These things range in cost from, $10 to $200. It really depends on what you want. So if you are interested in looking into getting your better audio, that's something you can move in the direction of. So a few more helpful resources specifically on this stuff. This presentation on the left is fantastic. This is, he basically presents different versions of what a presentation would look like. So he has his, tier 0 where you're in the kitchen and it's up at the camera at the ceiling light, and then version 2 where you're sitting at a desk and you look kind of more organized and presentable and the lighting's better. So he really outlines kind of what are the different quality tiers of a presentation, and really the goal is not even that high. So if you watch this video, even level 1 is fantastic. And he even says level 5 or level 4, which is the highest one he goes to, he actually can't do. He doesn't have the studio space. He doesn't have all these assistants. He doesn't have multiple cameras that he can turn to and talk to. So there's no need to do everything. Certainly not a goal to be like, I want to be level 4. That's probably career level. So that's not something we're going to go into, but it is a very nice video to help you understand just how big of a difference those little changes make. And then on the right here, we have 19 video presentation tips. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, kind of funny, but these are just really, really quick outlines of what you might do. I think I talk about most of it in the presentation, but it's a nice little kind of laugh, little humor bit too. So take a look, and there's some great tips there you can refer to. So that's the second chunk of the presentation. If anybody has any questions about kind of the equipment, the setting up your setup, I'll give a minute or so and we'll see if anyone has any questions before we dive into the last section. So let's jump on to next section, recording and submitting. So again, this is probably the part that people are the most stressed out about. All the other things we've done to this point can help reduce your stress by making you feel more confident. But of course, this is where we really dive in. I will say that this section does have a lot of things that you'll refer to. So I'll have images that actually show you kind of step-by-step what to click on. So that's a thing you can refer to at your own time, of course, and play with. But just so you have a sense, there's going to be a lot more of images like this. So just like when you're planning your presentation, there are two options I'm going to highlight here for how you can record your presentation and get it ready to be submitted. So one of them is to use PowerPoint. PowerPoint actually has a feature built in that allows you to present and record your audio and your video. The other option is Zoom. Again, you can get a free 40-minute Zoom. And the really nice thing about that is that you have a little bit more kind of control over the final product. So we'll dive into a little bit more detail about each of these. So setting up your PowerPoint, there's 3 slides here that are going to walk you through it. I'll talk about it briefly, but most of this you're going to have to follow by yourself on your own computer with your own device. So basically, if you have your presentation ready, you're happy with it, you're ready to go, you can start a slideshow on the presentation in PowerPoint, and then you can actually, next step, you'll be given a view like this, which is similar to the presenter view, if you've used that before. But basically, if you say you want to record your slideshow, it'll give you this recording tab and it'll let you see all of these options. So personally, I wouldn't worry about starting and stopping. It's pretty easy to edit chunks of things out. So as long as you're recording, if you need to stop, if you make a mistake, that's totally fine. The thing I always say if you make a mistake when you're speaking in a presentation is take a moment, pause, and then the pause is the note to me as the editor to say there's something up here. I need to make sure I pay attention. And then just start the sentence again. And all I do is chop out that part that got screwed up, and it flows automatically. So if you record one straightforward recording, you don't need to worry about constantly starting and stopping. So this is what it looks like. To start your recording, you click the round red button. To end it, you pick the square stop button. And basically, it'll walk you through the whole process of recording. So you can record for each slide individually. One important thing to know about PowerPoint is that when they do this, they're recording per slide, not overall. So when you're flipping between slides, there's no audio in that chunk. So you really want to make sure you finish your slide, finish talking, flip slides, and then you start talking again. So you don't want to talk over that transmission period between the two slides. But again, they've tried to make it as simple as possible. So this is kind of what you'll be looking for. And then, of course, your last step here, once you have that, you'll be able to export your presentation. And this is just kind of the setup you'll see. So you'll actually be able to decide what you want to call it, where you want to put it, what format, quality, timing, etc. is in it. So in this case, with what we do, we're going to primarily be using MP4s or MOVs. So all you do is click that from the file format dropdown. You have to click a button that says use recorded timings, because that's what you just did when you recorded your audio. You can choose the quality. Generally speaking, higher quality is always better, but of course it takes a lot more bandwidth. So it really depends on what you're presenting, exactly how high quality you want. An example would be for if I was doing something on print, like I was getting a poster printed, we do 300 dots per inch. And that's a pretty good quality image. If I'm doing something on the computer, I only need 72 because the computer can't show more detail than that. So that's something to keep in mind, is depending on where it's going to be. Is it going to be sitting, as an image at the bottom of a long list of images, or is this a video that's going to be played on a giant screen somewhere down the line? So that'll help you decide on your quality. If you're not sure, lean towards higher. We can always make it smaller. We can't do it the other way around. And then of course, last step is you just export the file. So that is how you use PowerPoint to record a presentation and get it in a format that you can send. Again, you'll probably have to refer back to this to go through all these details to make sure you're clicking all the right buttons, but you have the images here, so that should help you out through that process. Next option we're going to talk about is Zoom. Again, this is my preferred option. So when you start off with Zoom, you see this as your kind of login screen. And when you go to your settings and then you go to your recording settings, you'll see all of these options that are available to you. So I mentioned earlier, for example, that, the recording that I'm doing of this presentation is recording me and the presentation and the audio, and that's it. And that's because of the details I've put here. So you can choose these all for yourself. For example, do you want your name to show up in the top right corner with your image? So pretty much all of these recordings, they're going to put your image right up here away from your presentation. And you're going to kind of just sit there visually. But you can decide whether you want your name to show, for example, when that happens. Yeah, there's lots of details. Another one I really like is to record an audio only file. Can be really nice, especially if you want to do a podcast or want to put that content up somewhere else. Having just the audio is always great. So again, play with your settings, see what you can do. One of the options here I have is record gallery view when you have shared screen. So that would be an option, for example, that would allow me to see all of your names in my recording rather than just my face. So, for example, this is the first slide of the presentation today. For a second, I was like, wait a minute, I jumped back to the beginning. And if you click on the more in the bottom right corner, it'll pop up and say record on this computer, and it'll use whatever settings you've created. So when you start a meeting, you'll be able to record, and then you can present your presentation as you like. It's quite nice to be able to share screen like that and just have it all nice and clean. You don't have to worry about exporting at the end, because when Zoom does it, it already exports it as an MP4. So that's one nice thing, is you don't have to do that whole export process. If you've told it to record and to save on your device, it will save in the format we need. So a few things to keep in mind though, as you're choosing how to use Zoom. So when you share screen, you're going to get a pop-up that looks just like this pop-up here. It'll look a little different because you don't have the same tabs open as me, of course. But there's a few things to keep in mind. So once I click that share screen button, the next thing is that there are these two checkboxes at the bottom, share sound and optimize for video clip. So that's basically if you're sharing a video, for example, and you don't click share sound, it's going to show the video with no sound. So it's something to always check especially if you have audio visual, and to make sure you do that before you click whatever you want to share. So in this case, I said share screen, I want to share sound, and then I want to share this presentation. And then once you do that, you can share exactly as you like, and you can use that to start recording. Optimize for video is helpful if you're going to be sharing videos, but broadly speaking, it's better to attach a video than it is to integrate it into your presentation. So email me a link or send the actual video rather than playing the video yourself. And it's sort of like a photocopy of a photocopy situation on that, right? As much as possible, we want to try to stop making versions because each version is going to be a little lower quality than the one before. So that's kind of the risks of audiovisual, right? In a lot of cases, I either give the control to people, so I'll put up a link and say, click on this, go watch it on your own device. That's nice because it does not run through both systems. So if I'm playing the video, it's going through my system, which is going through the internet, which is going to your system, which then is going to you, as opposed to you just clicking a video and just watching it yourself. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but primarily speaking, videos can be riskier than audio because there's more information being sent. Okay, so those are the details about some options to record your video. Now, how do you submit your video? So there's a few options you can use. The first is that you can use a file hosting software. So something like Google Drive, Dropbox. It's not called OneNote, OneDrive. Any of those are great options. The really nice thing is that they are secure and you can send a link to someone and you can know that that link is only going to the person you messaged. So you can actually say, make this viewable only to people whose email addresses I have put into the system. So even if the person you've emailed this to emails it to someone else, that person can't access it unless you add them. So there's a lot of control around making sure that it's only downloaded by the people you want it to be downloaded when you use a file host. It's also nice because usually the maximum size you can upload is a lot higher than if you used an attachment in an email, which is the second option. If you can email the video as an attachment, that's always super easy. But I believe it's under 5 kilobytes you need to have, no megabytes, for Outlook. So you can always give it a try. Always try to email the video as an attachment. And if it starts giving you an error, it'll usually suggest a file host that you can use. Again, you can always just decide to start there, though. There's no reason to go through the process if you don't want to. And the last option is to upload and send a YouTube link. Generally, this is better if your video is finalized. So if you don't need any editing done, if you start and stop on time and you have no issues throughout the video, then you could definitely upload that yourself and then just send the YouTube link to whoever is putting the videos together. It's probably one of the more difficult ones just because it relies on you having edited the video and also successfully uploading your video to YouTube. Not too difficult, but it does take a fair amount of bandwidth to do so. Yeah, so there's a few options on submitting your video. Again, you have easy options, hard options, depends on the size. And we're already at our last slide here. So helpful resources that are available. So the first one I have here on the left is the Zoom YouTube library. So you click on this link, it shows you 40 short videos that will help you with Zoom features. So if you're like, how do I use the share screen? How do I do breakout rooms? These videos are quite short, usually 1 minute to 4 minutes, and they'll walk you through any feature you need. So if you're trying to figure out a way to make something work, the secret that a lot of tech people don't tell you is that they'll Google it. Tech changes really, really fast, and there isn't always an answer that's going to stay the answer forever. So looking up information is really, really important. And then on the right, this one's more if you're interested in learning a little bit more about file types. I mentioned really quickly MP4s and MOVs, which are formats you can use to get video and audio. But there's all kinds of different ones, you know, from images to presentations to PDFs. So this is just a little bit about understanding what some of those formats mean and how to understand what they're communicating. Certainly not needed by any chance, but it's kind of interesting to understand why we're using different formats. Why would you use one over another? Because there are very good reasons why you might say, get a PNG over a JPEG or vice versa. So that is the end of our presentation. I planned 20 minutes for each of those sections, so I think we're pretty good on time there, and we have a good half hour potentially to use for questions if people have them. So I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open it up if anyone has any questions that they want to ask now, and we'll try to walk through some of that. And yeah.